Hey guys, Quantum here, and in this video I wanted to cover a new way you could be playing Emerald Amethyst with the release of AZURITE C. It's all hinging around one of the newest cards in the set in Maleficent Staff, also an enchanted, quite nice. This card is a 2-cost inkable item that says whenever one of your opponent's characters, items, or locations is returned to their hand from play, you gain 1 lore. So this has a tremendous matchup already against other Amethyst decks, since other Amethyst decks always play Mim Fox, Mim Snake, including if you ever run into a mirror match with this deck. And even some Emerald decks that want to self-bounce, think like Amber Emerald bouncing their own stuff with the Muses like Ariel, Spectacular Singer to replay and stuff like that, but that's more of a niche scenario. Regardless, the whole point of this deck is you want to bounce your opponent's stuff back to hand. You want to control the board state through that. You're not generating a lot of card advantage by doing that, obviously. So your opponent still has their resource. You're not destroying it. But now you actually get some extra utility in getting that tempo disruption by bouncing their stuff back because you gain lore if you have Maleficent Staff up. So the way that I've opted to construct this deck here, you can see it is a total of 61 cards. We've got 56 inkable cards and only 5 uninkable, so a very accessible playable deck. On the cost curve here, we more or less start capping out at 3 with just a few niche options in 4, 5, and 6, and we'll cover that in just a moment. In the 1-drop slot, we've got Chernobog Followers, continues to be the best 1-drop for Amethyst, I think. We've got the new Diablo Obedient Raven as well. This works well with some of the combo pieces we'll go over in just a moment. And then the Magic Broom. So these are all 1-drop characters that replace themselves. That's very good. And also give you a lot of utility to use with your own Mim cards so that you can get some heavier bodies on the board like Madam Mim Snake and Madam Mim Fox, which is one of your main tools of removal in a deck like this, like hard removal. And also in the 2-drop slot, we're opting to play Mother Gothel, Conceited Manipulator. Obviously, you do not really want to drop this on 2. So that's why you also have the Staff or the Snake that you probably want to play instead, or more 1-drops, like 2 more 1-drops if you could. But you really want to play this when you can start utilizing the Kicker 3 in order to bounce an opposing chosen character on the opponent's side back to their hand. I mean, you could bounce your own character as well, but you obviously want to be bouncing your opponent's card. If you have more than 1 staff up, you'll be gaining, more than 1 lore. So if you have 2 staffs up and you bounce an opponent's character, you'll gain 2 lore for that, right? Really, really strong. So that's one of the combo pieces with the deck. And again, it's just the tempo disruption can be very, very critical, bouncing back, a very high cost character that your opponent plays by the time turn 5 rolls around. Mim Fox is one of your hard removals, opting, to also cycle through your Mother Gothel, your Cloud Kicker to continue to bounce, your Crabs to bounce back and just get a lot of utility that way. And of course, it's very accessible since you play a number of 1-drops that are very easy to bounce with the Mim Fox or Mim Snake. The Crab, again, in testing, I played this deck in 3 matches and I won 2 and I lost 1. The Crab is pretty important, so I was running 2, but I upped it to 3 just because Hierums are everywhere, and just getting the extra boost of Challenger 3 on like a Goat, on a Mim Fox or something really makes the difference in taking out an opposing Hierum. So I upped it to 3 and I reduced the Cloud Kicker to 2. This card is very valuable, right? But it is limited with what you can do to it. Play, a character with 2 or less strength can be bounced, and this can bounce back a Hierum, but the issue is they just replay it and continue to draw a ton of cards, continue ramping, right, if you're against Sapphire, and then they just overwhelm you anyways before you can disrupt them enough where because if they play multiple interactions in a turn, you can really only bounce 1 thing in a turn. So if they overwhelm the board too much, it starts to get away from you. So you really do need to deal with the Hierum by just banishing it if you can, and just limit their options. Because if you're aggressively questing, which is what you want to do, right, these cards will replace themselves, you can just quest with them. When your opponent starts outing your stuff, if you have another combo piece up, it makes it very, very difficult for them to play around it and win the game, and we'll cover that in just a second. Next up, we've got 4 Merlin Goats and 3 Muses. The Muses is a tech option. I don't know if you necessarily need this, but it does help you accelerate your game plan, can really put your opponent on a clock when you start bouncing additional things when you sing songs, because we do play a number of songs in this deck, and we'll cover that in just a moment. And then 2 Mother Gothel, Unwavering Schemer, a shift target, just good to raw play out sometimes, and force a bounce to clutch out the game, because you'll gain lore, hopefully, when you force the bounce, plus a quest for 2. So I think that's your only 2 quester in the deck. Yeah, it is. So again, you're chipping away at your opponent, questing for 1, bouncing stuff, gaining lore off the staff in the process. And again, I'll show you a simulation or 2 in this video so you can check that out. For the songs, we've got 13. Okay, we've got 2 Poor Unfortunate Souls. So this is nice because, again, being a song, it triggers the muses as well, and it bounces anything, character, item, or location with cost 2 or less. So similar to Cloud Kicker, it's just not on a body. But this is a song, so it works with muses. You can sing it, so you don't have to spend ink if you don't want, like sing it with Snake. And then again, if you have the staff up and you see this later on in the game, you can gain lore off of the card that you bounce as well. And again, it's a tempo disruptor, right? So it synergizes well with the strategy. You've got 4 friends, and honestly, I found myself inking this more, like pretty much all the time, because you have just more efficient ways to draw, I guess, and you don't really want to waste the turn singing this. That being said, sometimes you do need to draw the cards, and singing this with like a crab and then bouncing crab back with fox or something works. Singing this in order to trigger the muses can help, or just hard casting it so it triggers the muses helps, and it's still a card advantage, right? So if you're in a kind of a simplified game state where not a lot of things are happening on the board, you can play this in a slower game state and generate advantage through just having an extra song. One of our only uninkables is going to be Mother Knows Best. So again, a very powerful song from the first chapter. Return chosen character to the player's hand. Nothing to really explain there. Playing Ursula, Deceiver of All would be an option because you do play, these, I guess, 9 songs that you could sing with her. And you get double utility off of bouncing, and then you get double utility off of bouncing with the Poor Unfortunate Souls if there are two things on board with 2 costs or less, and then you can draw 4 instead. There's just not enough room to fit her in here, I don't think. I mean, you can maybe say, like, don't play Cloud Kicker, play Ursula, Deceiver of All, cut back on, I don't know, like maybe the Gothels because it's too expensive. But again, this deck being focused around bouncing, I think these cards just synergize a little bit better than worrying about having to see specific cards in order to like trigger. Like if you see Ursula, Deceiver of All in isolation and you don't have one of these songs available, it's dead, right? It's a dead card. Whereas these things should hopefully always be active at least. Next up, in the item slot, we've got Maleficent Staff. So again, 4 of these, it's inkable at worst, but once you get these on board, you start bouncing, you're gaining lore in the process. And then the card that really, like, it's weird, because this card is uninkable, but the card that really brings the deck together is Emerald Chromacon. So during your opponent's turn, whenever one of your characters is banished, you may return chosen character to the player's hand. This is not once per turn. So if you flood the board with a bunch of those 1-drops, your opponent has to deal with them, like, or they just leave them to continue to quest. And if you I had a match where I won, where the opponent just let me continue to quest because they tried to outrace me. They tried to develop a board because they knew that if they were bouncing my stuff, banishing my stuff, I would be bouncing their stuff with the Chromacon that I had up, as well as gaining lore in the process because I bounced one of their cards with Chromacon. I would gain lore with my Maleficent Staff, and then once I put a second staff on board, they definitely couldn't start taking out my threats because then they would be forced to. Or I would be bouncing one of their cards back, and then they would be forced to give me 2 lore with the 2 staff. So for that reason, you could look at maybe playing like some aggro threat, like maybe 1-drop Maleficent, because like your opponent has to answer a 2-quester, and once they do, like you're forcing the bounce back, and then you're gaining lore in the process, hopefully. But you don't want to play more than 2, I don't think, because this card can be very bricky, and playing this card is technically like a tempo loss, right? Because it just comes down and you have to hope your opponent starts to take out your stuff. Like I said, in one match, my opponent almost did beat me by just trying to outrace me, but this card kind of stopped them from challenging into my stuff. So I just kept going wider and wider, and like they knew, like at a certain point, it was like they cannot banish any of my stuff, because if they do, I win the game, right? Because like once I got to like 15 lore, like if you started taking out my stuff, like I just win the game. So they had to win the game on the next turn, because either I quest for game next turn, or they take out all my stuff and I bounce all the, like I think they had like 3 characters on board. I would bounce all their characters back, and I think that they knew I had like a goat in hand because I cycled one. Like I just win the game either way, right? So an interesting setup here once you get this kind of pairing going. Again, being a 2 of, you may not always see this, but you don't need to see this to win. Like these bounce cards and the bounce characters and stuff is enough. And then a card that really kind of allows you to draw more efficiently than worrying about things like friends on the other side is a card like the Library. This card, again, in certain matchups will be ink. You won't bother playing it. But in other matchups, setting this up, gaining the 1 passive lore, forcing your opponent to say, like, I just have to like try to interact with this, leaving your characters open to continue questing, giving you more time to set up the Chromacon. Like, it's very weird how it works. But then moving your Chernobog, your Diablo, your Magic Broom to this location, being able to Fox, bounce something back, move Fox to the location, trade in Fox, draw a card off of it. Very powerful interactions once you hit 4 four ink, sorry, and are able to play this and move something there in the same turn, and then just continue to cycle through things that you're shifting around the library, and then gaining a lot of card advantage through it. So yeah, that's the deck profile. Let's go ahead and jump into a simulation where you can see some of the lines of play. So one of the tougher matchups against this deck is going to be Sapphire Steel. It will definitely give you some trouble. I did not play against it against another person in my 3 matches. So in this video, I'm showing you a simulation using RMB Sapphire Steel list, which is very, very good. It's probably the closest thing to the meta list that we're going to get for now. Utilizing the new Jim Hawkins line. Turn 1, they've got Fortisphere. The CPU, again, is just a simulation to show you some lines. They get a very strong play, right? Turn 1, item. Turn 2, AZURITE. Thankfully, no follow-up item. Our turn 1 is Diablo, and our turn 2 is Maleficent Staff, just because there's no real point in developing the snake here, in my opinion. So we can save that for a little bit later. They get another Fortisphere after inking and drop a Pete, which doesn't really impact us here at this moment. We do draw Crab, and this is a good utilization with the Diablo if we opt to keep it up readied. Now, the Cloud Kicker in this matchup, it has limited value. It's good against the Hirams, obviously, but not really good against too much else, except for the shiftable Jim Hawkins, the 0/4 that costs 2 as well. We can bounce that back. But yeah, this bigger Jim Hawkins comes in, and this one is a problem. We have to be very careful with how we approach this, because it's a big body that can also sing a whole new world, and so you have to be very mindful of that. They're on 3 cards, no Hiram yet, so I am thinking that they are sitting on a whole new world. And I'm thinking here, do I need to take out the Pete, and how do I play around, I guess, not even a potential Tinkerbell or Steel removal spells? You can see why this is a tough match. We opt to drop the Mother Gothel, which again isn't great. There's no sense in dropping Crab here since Snake still trades with the Pete. And then I pass turn. They do indeed have a removal. The Grab Your Swords comes in. The Mother Gothel survives. And that's why they did it. So they cleared the board, and then they whole new world into a fresh 7. Does use up their turn though. And they're still only on 1 lore. But as we know, Sapphire Steel has some very, very powerful top end. Tamatoas, Tinkerbells, probably Simba, Fighting Prince, so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and probably develop... Is it the Muses to set up for singing next turn? No, because the Jim Hawkins is just too strong, right? At 5, being a 5/5 body is crazy. We drop Fox and we don't challenge, so we just go Fox and Diablo with the Broom and pass turn. Okay, they play the small Jim Hawkins and then sing Grab Your Swords. So that's really unfortunate, because we're going to lose Broom and the Diablo. No Chromacon for us. They shift the Jim Hawkins as well to the bigger one and takes out the Fox in the process. So they wipe our whole board, and they have double big Jim Hawkins on board that quest for 4 total, which is a problem. So we're going to play a little bit slower. Drop Staff, drop Goat, pass turn. This is where seeing Crab can come in handy. They drop Tinkerbell, so we're starting to see some of those big threats. Still no Hiram on their side, but they're sifting through their deck quite effectively. Yet another whole new world, discarding our hand there. And you can just see how crazy the Sapphire Steel deck is. How are we possibly going to win? Still no Chromacon on our end, which is wild. So we're going to draw. Yeah, we got Crab now at least. But do we really want to lose our Goat to the Crab? What we could do is play Crab, boost Goat, Goat take out Jim Hawkins, play Fox, Fox bounce back Crab, boost up the Fox, Fox trade into the second Jim Hawkins, and that clears up the board. They've gone through, I think, maybe 3 whole new worlds, because they played 2 and maybe they discarded. I think they discarded 1 in one of their hands. So we probably don't have to worry about another one. They've got just under 30 cards left in their deck, but they do still have Hirams, which will draw them a ton of cards, right? Which is kind of scary. So the Tinkerbell's going to quest. Speaking of which, there's the Hirams. Then the draw engine starts. The Cogsworth comes in. We don't really care too much about that since we're not dealing too much damage. And the Crab boost is usually enough to get over the resist 1. If they get multiple Cogsworth on board, though, it can be a bit of an issue. But the Mother Gothel here goes pretty hard, because we will be able to bounce back kind of a bigger threat. So we're going to double Crab on the Diablo, and then the Diablo is going to take out Tinkerbell, even going past the resist, because we would do Challenger 6, which gets over the 5 willpower plus resist 1. We do draw off of the Diablo as well, and then we're able to bounce back with the Cloud Kicker, the Hiram, which gets us 2 lore because we have double staff up. So they are going to just go ahead and redrop Hiram, draw even more cards, play Pete, stopping us from playing the Mother Knows Best next turn, which is kind of unfortunate, and they don't bother exerting their Cogsworth. So smart play by the CPU, actually, not leaving it exposed to getting crabbed and snaked away. We're going to drop Gothel, though, and pay the kicker to bounce, gaining 2 lore in the process. Quest with Cloud Kicker, no way to bounce it back. And we do have the shift line for the Mother Gothel next turn, which will represent 4 lore. 2 off of the staffs that will result in the bounce, and then another 2 off of questing with the Maleficent that we shift. The opponent goes fairly wide, double Hiram and a Jim Hawkins, fire the cannons for no reason on my Snake. Maybe they have another whole new world that they want to cast next turn, so they're just trying to use up all their ink. We draw into another shiftable Gothel, and that's okay. We do have the ability to also play the Mother Knows Best as well, so that's something to keep in mind. Having a Muses on board here would also be really clutch, because we could bounce back pretty much their whole board if only the Cogsworth didn't have ward, but because it does, that's the only thing we can't deal with. The Snake will trade into the Pete. The Gothel will shift, forcing the opponent to bounce back their Jim Hawkins, or they choose to bounce it back. We gain 2 lore off that. We gain 2 lore off of the Gothel questing, and then we play Goat to gain an additional lore. So that was a 5 lore turn. The opponent plays Time, and then, yeah, CPU things, right? You would never really do that. Uses Dime to gain a lore, and then banishes it with the Hiram quest to draw 2. So very inefficient turn by them, but we are so far ahead at this point, and we have another Gothel and another Mother Knows Best, which gets us a total of 4 lore, right? So we pretty much have the game, because once they get rid of Goat, that's the 5th lore. We win the game regardless. So even though they made a really bad play there with the Dime, it was a foregone conclusion. I think overall the CPU did decently well with this deck. You can just see how good, though. Like, if the CPU could hold its own with a deck like this, that goes to show you how good R&B's list is. It is very good, I will say. But yeah, we pretty much have game on board here. Just quest for game, and that's it. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Let me know what you think of this deck. If you've tried it, what do you think of this new concept of a way to play Emerald Amethyst? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.